don't let the blue hair and femboy vibe distract you from the fact that this nigga has a fetish for crippled bitches. No shade to my crippled individuals, it's just the fact that this nigga has a fetish for it, which is insane. But welcome back to How They Made It, where I go through every single person that survived the NEL and then explain how they were able to do it. So go grab some snacks, sit down, get comfortable, because this is going to be a very long video. I'm actually sitting down and trying a new vibe for this because this might go on YouTube, I'm not quite sure. And it's going to be a very long video, and I'm not standing up for all of this. But anyway, enough yapping, let's actually talk about Hiori. The first time we are ever introduced to Hiori is in the third selection. The Blue Lock players are now split up into two sorts of different teams. You've got the top six, which are considered the main strikers, and then you've got the rest of the characters, which are more like the supporting characters. The top six is then split into three different teams. One has Rin and Shido, the other one has Otoya and Karasu, and the last one has Nagi and Yukimiya. Then all of the supporting players pick a team they want to go on, and then that's where we're at so far. Then Ego picks 3 random players to join each team out of the people that did select to join that team. And then each team kind of just has to face off against each other. So in this first game, Hiori gets picked, Nanase gets picked, and Isagi gets picked to go on Team A. And then they're playing against Team B, which is Karasu, Otoya, Chigiri, and then 2 nobodies. One thing I do want to mention now that I've got all the time in the world is the fact that Hiori and Nanase were both intentionally picked to play with Isagi in this third selection game. The reason why I'm saying that they're intentionally picked is because from this panel and these interactions, we can kind of deduce that Nanase is a talented learner. It's not confirmed in any writing, but it's kind of confirmed with the statement from Isagi saying, "What kind of soft atmosphere is this? It's like there's some sense of unity." Just to go on a quick tangent though about talented learners and geniuses when it comes to interactions, is that talented learners will have this softer atmosphere about them. But with individualistic people, you usually have to gain their respect before they actually start to talk to you like a human. Because we see that with Barrow, we see that with Rin, we see that with Chigiri to a degree, we see that with Shido. All of those people, you had to gain their respect before they actually treated you like an actual person. But in this case, this is the first time that Nanase, Hiori, and Isagi have ever met each other, and they've got this soft atmosphere and this sense of unity. So for me at least, this all but confirms that Nanase is a talented learner, because the only way that Nanase would be able to kind of mesh with the same vibe that Hiori and Isagi have is if he has the same ego type. It makes a lot of sense, Nanase being a talented learner, because he's basically just the nerf version of Isagi. To fully understand why I'm saying that Hiori is the better version of Isagi at this moment in time is because Hiori gives Isagi a lot of information to actually work with. Because Isagi is a talented learner, and Hiori gives him all of the information about how Karasu actually operates. He tells Isagi pretty much that Karasu likes to analyze the enemy team, find the weakest link, and then kind of make all of the plays go through that weakest link so it's easier for them to actually work. And in a metaphorical sense, because we're not quite there yet, Hiori metaphorically gives Isagi the key to his evolution here because he tells him, instead of facing Karasu with your weaknesses, face him with your strengths. Jumping forward in time a little bit, the score is now like 2-1, it doesn't really matter, but Isagi is kind of shut out now because Karasu keeps shutting him down. But Rin sees that Isagi is no longer an option, so instead of trying to use him when it's obviously not working, he passes to Hiori instead, and he says, "Match me." And another quick tangent, the only reason why Hiori's actually able to match the tempo that Rin's playing at the moment is kind of because of his background. It's not just because of his backstory, don't get me wrong, but the fact that Hiori is used to playing with people at a really high skill level, it makes sense how he's able to link up with Rin so easily. Because let's not forget, Hiori's parents are silver medalists. That means that when he was growing up playing football, he's probably playing it at a higher level than all the other people were playing it. That would also explain how he's able to have such a calm demeanor and uses metavision this early on in the story. Because even though he doesn't end up being a striker, the experience he's managed to accumulate over the years playing at that high level, being a striker, he's able to understand and kind of sympathize with what the strikers are trying to do. I know people are going to hear that argument and just be like, oh, but if anybody played from a young age, they'll always be able to link up. And it's kind of the same, but it's not really the same. Like, to be honest, you can kind of take or leave this take, it doesn't really matter, but I'm just saying that Hiori's used to playing at a higher level compared to everybody else, literally just because of his background. Like, him having silver medalist parents, they're obviously going to put him in programs that are considered higher level compared to what Isugi was playing at, for example. Obviously, later down the line, we could see an Isugi flashback, and Isugi's been playing at the exact same level as Hiori, but we don't know yet, and I'm just going to assume that Hiori's been playing at a level above. But while Hiori is linking up with Rin, Isugi sees that Hiori is indeed amazing at passing. And another thing you can pick up from this game is the fact that Hiori doesn't have any sort of ego or drive to score in this game. He's just playing as a playmaker. Obviously, the people that didn't make it into the top 6 are going to be supporting the top 6, but considering that people that aren't the top 6 can score, Hiori doesn't try at all. And Ego told them before that they're supposed to use the top 6 as a stepping stone to evolve themselves. And Hiori starts evolving himself because he's using them, but he's using them as strikers, so he's improving his playmaking skills. So in a way, he's doing exactly what Ego asked him to do, but he's not applying it in the same manner. Because yes, Hiori could technically just dribble past this guy at this point, because he does have a fairly good dribbling stat, and it is comparable to this nobody at least. Because we've seen this nigga dribble past Don Lorenzo. And I'm not saying that that feat is consistent by no means, but he should at least have the skill to dribble past this guy. But instead, he doesn't. He just passes to Rin. And another funny thing to notice is that this is kind of technically following his true ego, because he's passing and linking up with the best person in the program. And his true ego later on is to just be the person that's there to make the best person in the world. And because in this game we see him both use Isugi and Rin, and he never really assists any sort of Shido goal, that makes sense that his true ego later on is more dependent on the world's best. Because funny enough, the two people he linked up with who scored in this game are the two people that end up being the world's best in the NEL. So maybe I'm just overreading it here, but the fact that Hiori always uses the world's best, even way back here, pretty fucking funny. Because even after Team B scores again and it's Team A's kickoff, Shido passes the ball to Rin, and then Rin instantly passes to Hiori. And if you look down there, you'll notice that Hiori is looking around and scanning the field. And we know from the Manshine game that to actually use Metavision, you need to be looking around and scanning the field. And I want to say, this is going to sound weird and you need to kind of let me land with this, that Hiori is using Metavision, but it's not the Metavision. Because I think in this situation, he is using Metavision. It's just because his skills are low, his Metavision usage is low, and it's not official yet. He's only able to actually activate Metavision in the Ubers game, which is 3 games into the NEL. And keep in mind, that's already after the U20 game and this game. So I would say that Metavision, you can use it at lower levels, but obviously you're not going to get like the shit in your eye until you're seen as skillful enough. Because I think it's quite an easy argument to make that Hiori is using Metavision at this point. It's just because we don't know about it yet, because we're not at that skill level yet, we don't actually know what it is, and Hiori's using the weaker version of it. Because even Isugi points out that Hiori has a calm demeanor and he's constantly scanning the field. It says it right here. Hiori, he's turning his head to confirm the current situation, calmly constructing passes with Rin. And obviously, going back to his backstory, I think the foundations of Hiori's playstyle, especially now, are definitely built on the situations he was in when he was younger. Obviously, take this take with a grain of salt, but the reason why Hiori might be looking around, especially even at this level, is kind of because when he was playing when he was younger, and his parents would watch him, if he didn't spot something and or if he got tackled, he would then get blamed for that because he didn't see it, so it's been drilled into his head that he needs to look around and survey the entire field. And that might sound like I'm trying to make a case to say that Hiori is a restricted ego type, and I'm not. I'm just simply saying because of the pressure that his parents put on him all the time, he was just used to looking around and constantly looking for danger. Like I said, you can take that take with a grain of salt. I'm just kind of talking from my experience because when I was younger, at least, I would constantly look around the field because I was terrified that something was going to go wrong and then I'd get blamed for it. I'm kind of projecting that onto Hiori, but I'm not doing it because I want to be relatable. I'm doing it because it kind of makes sense. But kind of ignoring that take and going back to Hiori constantly using the world's best, Hiori makes another pass towards Rin. And we know it's definitely for Rin because Isugi even says, there, it's the perfect trajectory. Wait, another pass to Rin? And then obviously just as the ball is landing, Shido interrupts Rin's shooting stance and they both kind of charge into each other and they miss. So if you want to see the rest of this analysis, go over to the YouTube because I'm going to put this part and all the other parts that I've recorded for Hiori up on there. Just so we're all on the same page, I'm not going to abandon my TikTok. I am going to upload on here. It will just be the first 10 minutes of my YouTube videos. Don't get me wrong, I do love doing this, analyzing characters and then posting the results I've come up with, but I don't make any money off any of these videos. We're starting to get to a point where this is more demanding than my actual 9 to 5. So in an effort to make this viable and so I can start producing more higher quality content, I am going to start uploading all the other parts onto YouTube. So check that out. Thanks for enjoying my bullshit drink water. Something I also forgot to mention when I was talking about Hiori, Nanase, and Isugi is the fact that Nanase is the weaker version of Isugi because he's supposed to fill in Isugi's weaknesses. And Hiori is the better version of him because he gives him key pieces of information he needs to evolve. Because in this game, both Hiori and Nanase do kind of follow the characteristics of their characters. Nanase just helps and fills in the gaps of weaknesses. And Hiori gives Isugi information about how Karasu works and how he could improve his playstyle, talking about moving reflexively. So when I said in that previous part that Nanase and Hiori were intentionally picked to play with Isugi, that's kind of just what I mean. Because both of the characters were integral for Isugi's evolution in this game. And you could make the argument that Isugi could have done this with anybody on his team, but I don't actually think he could have. Because to me at least, this is the best environment that Isugi could be in if he wants to evolve. He's got 2 other talented learners on his team. One is weaker and fills in his gaps. The other one is stronger and helps him learn stuff. And then he's got 2 geniuses who are the strikers who he can then use and devour. Let's put that tangent to the side because we're actually supposed to talk about Hiori. So Karasu and Rin are kind of having this 1v1 and then Isugi's able to come from Karasu's blind spot and steal the ball. And he's only able to do that because of the information that Hiori gave him about how Karasu actually works. Because hypothetically speaking, if Hiori wasn't on this team, I don't actually see Isugi being able to beat Karasu. You could make an argument and say that Isugi can analyze Karasu and then figure out how he works, but considering he doesn't and he actually does rely on what Hiori tells him, I'm just going to assume he can't. At least not yet. Anyway, Isugi has stole the ball from Karasu and then he links up with Hiori and Nanase. And because each character kind of represents a different vibe, I'm saying currently Hiori is the best example we have for talented learners. Obviously excluding Isugi. If we're not talking about the main character, I would say Hiori is our baseline for what a talented learner actually is. What I mean by that is that the interactions that Hiori has with people can tell us whether they're a talented learner or not, because Hiori interacts with Nanase kind of like how he does with Isugi, and then that would tell me at least that Nanase is a talented learner. And what's even fucking funnier is that in the recent chapter, in the leaks that have just come out, Nanase is sat next to Hiori on the bus when they're returning from the NEL. Again, maybe I'm just reading into this, but to me at least, it seems like they're hinting and or trying to push that Nanase is a talented learner. All of that information comes from just his interactions with Hiori. You can count Isugi in here, but I'm not really counting Isugi just for the sake of the video. But they build the play up, and then Hiori gets the ball, and he makes the final pass towards Isugi. And this build-up doesn't end up in a goal just because Isugi isn't there as a striker yet. He's a good player, but his physical stats ain't all that. And like I said, that pass doesn't actually result in a goal, but that's nothing to do with Hiori. That's just because Isugi isn't there yet. Because their link-up was fine. They saw the same state of the field and they knew what was going to happen next. It's just that Isugi couldn't keep up with his mind. Because technically speaking, you could say that this is the first hint of the Reflex X Reflex goal because Hiori and Isugi didn't really make a plan for this beforehand. They were both kind of smashing their visions of the field together. It's just that Isugi couldn't keep up. So me personally, I think you could make a really solid argument that their Reflex X Reflex goal was hinted at in this game. The reason why I'm saying that that was the first hint of the Reflex X Reflex goal is because Hiori is talking about using your reflexes in this game. So then, Hiori giving Isugi this advice would then mean that Hiori is playing by reflex. So if Isugi was able to score that goal, he would then be playing off reflex as well. And to just go on a quick tangent, me personally, I think there's 2 types of Reflex X Reflex goals. There is the standard version, which is basically just any goal that is scored from the NEL onwards. To fully understand what I mean with that first take, technically speaking, Kaiser's goal in the PXG game was a Reflex X Reflex goal. The goal that Isugi scored at the end of the PXG game was a Reflex X Reflex goal. And then the second type of Reflex X Reflex goal is the no-look version. It's kind of hard for me to explain this take, but there are two types of Reflex X Reflex because one of them, they do score by Reflex X Reflex, it's just not explicitly stated. Then the second version, the no-look version, is explicitly stated to be Reflex X Reflex because it happens with Shido, it happens with Sai, it happens with Hiori and Isugi. It specifically points out that they're not looking at each other and or that it's a Reflex X Reflex goal. Because you could make an argument that some of the goals that are scored that we do see are a Reflex X Reflex chemical reaction, it's just never explicitly stated. So whether you want to take it or leave it, there are kind of two versions of the Reflex X Reflex goal. And to back up my take of Nanase being the weaker version and Hiori being the stronger version intentionally picked to play with Isugi, Isugi takes the information that Hiori gave him and then he starts to apply it to his gameplay. Because kind of jumping forward in time, Hiori giving Isugi this information is kind of Hiori giving Isugi the key to his potential. Because it's only after Isugi hears out Hiori and then starts to actually apply it to his gameplay that he's actually able to score. It's the panel just after this one. Isugi runs in between Shido and Rin because he reflexively started to use Metavision. And then he's able to shoot and score off Hiori's pass. So kind of looking at the timeline of Isugi's evolution in this game, he starts off and he's around about in the middle, he's doing solid, he's linking up with Rin, he's linking up with Shido. Karasu then marks him and his performance drops. Nanase then comes in, fills in the gaps, and then Isugi goes kind of right back to where he was before. Then Hiori gives him extra information and he rises up to Hiori's level. The only actual problem I have with this game is that Karasu, I'm looking you dead in the eyes right now. How the fuck did you think Isugi was weaker than Nanase? But anyway, the game wraps up. Team A won, obviously, because they've got all the best players on that team and the main characters on that team. And then Hiori, Nanase, and Isugi all sit down together to have like a post-match summary of everything that happened. And this, again, is another reason why I'm saying that Nanase is a talented learner because this nigga is always surrounded by talented learners. It's not in this panel exactly, but it's around about this time. Nanase admits that he can't read Shido or Rin, but he was able to read Isugi a lot easier. So if you combine that with the whole soft atmosphere that Isugi was talking about before, and the fact that Nanase is basically the nerfed version of Isugi, you can just say that Nanase is a talented learner. Because they all sit down after the game has finished, and then they all start to share information with each other. And that, to me, is the most talented learner fucking thing anyone could do. Because talented learners evolve when they're given more information. And Hiori gave Isugi more information, and that's how he was able to evolve. And now they're all sitting down together, giving each other information, so they can all evolve. It's just that in this scenario, because Hiori is technically the best player out of the three of them, Hiori is giving more new information for them to work with. Because me personally, I don't think it's crazy to say that at this point in the story right now, Hiori is a better player than Isugi is. Because at this point in the story right now, I would say that Hiori is better at analyzing than Isugi is. So Hiori's there to analyze and then feed that information to Isugi so Isugi can then start to adapt quicker. Because not only is the information Hiori is feeding to Isugi valuable, how they are interacting is also kind of evolving the talented learner aspect of Isugi. This isn't officially stated in the manga by no means, but it does make sense. When you and another person are both kind of discussing a topic and analyzing it, even though you might not get anywhere with the topic you're discussing, because you're essentially practicing analyzing stuff, that is going to increase the efficiency of how you're able to analyze everything else. It's kind of hard to explain using just words, but hypothetically speaking, imagine Isugi's analytical stat is around about this level. Because Hiori's is up here, Isugi has to get better at doing it so he can use the information Hiori's giving him. But at the same time, it's hard to explain because there's not necessarily a hierarchy with it because everybody's a talented learner, so then everybody can see the value in what the other person's saying. Like with Nanase, for example, Nanase could have the lowest analytical stat out of all three of them, but he could pick up on something that the other two don't see. So when we see talented learners sat down discussing stuff, they're all essentially evolving their analytical skills. And the best way to do that is to test the information you have managed to gain against somebody else's. Because they might pick up on something that you don't see, and you might pick up on something that they don't see. The only way you're able to actually get anywhere with this is if you talk to the person and bounce off them. Because you'll even notice, just from this one post-game summary of what's happening, Isugi breaks himself down again, and he's not even on the fucking football pitch. And now we're finally at the U20 game, when Hiori and Reo get subbed in. To kind of just fill you in where we're currently at, this is the second half. Shido has just come on and scored the Big Bang Drive, and after scoring that, Nico and Chigiri have been subbed, and they get subbed for Hiori and Reo. I'm trying my hardest not to talk about the Big Bang Drive because there's something I want to say about it, but this is a Hiori video. After Shido scored that goal, both Nico and Chigiri get subbed because Nico's injured and Chigiri's running out of stamina. And Ego says he wants to add more stability to the Blue Lock team, so he decides to add 2 talented learners. I know this isn't really reflected in the final bids for the NEL, but me personally, I would say that Hiori is a better playmaker than Reo is. Because in this game, both of them get subbed on, and Reo goes as a centre-back and Hiori goes as a right wing. You could make an easy argument that Reo only plays in the centre-back position because Nico got subbed and they just needed to fill in that area, and Reo fits it better than Hiori does. But then, to kind of just argue with myself, I don't think that's the case because Ego's intentions were just to score more goals than the enemy team can. So when it comes to him deciding who goes where when they finally get subbed on, he puts Hiori in the right wing, and I think that's just because Hiori is better at playmaking than Reo is. Because at this point in time, Reo is still focused on just using Nagi, so that would then kind of hinder the amount of plays he can make because he's focused on Nagi too much. By no means am I trying to downplay how good Reo actually is because he's got one of the best weapons in the verse and he's still a solid player with it. I'm just simply saying that if you was to compare Reo's playmaking skills to Hiori's playmaking skills, Hiori's probably going to take the edge. And with Hiori's presence now on the offensive side, he changes the dynamics so much that even Isugi comments on it. Until now, we've all moved separately, with Rin at the center, and acted dynamically, without pause, expressing all our individual strengths at once. He has become an anchor on the front lines, a technician of stillness. And what's funny is, that stillness is then reflected in his aura, because his aura is ice. I know people say that it's glass, you can say that it's glass, I personally think that it's ice, and I think that it's ice because of this stillness right here. Combine that with his blue hair and the fact that he's always seen as a calm and collected person, I think that his aura is ice and it makes the most sense for it to be ice. But anyway, Hiori receives the ball and then Darai comes to pressure him. But kind of bouncing back over to why I said that Hiori is better at playmaking than Reo is that in this situation, Reo probably would have been biased and been trying to look and set up Nagi instead of everybody. But because it's Hiori instead, Hiori then scans all of the field and then sees unbiasedly all the options he can use. And because Hiori isn't biased when it comes to who he's going to pass to, that then makes the potential of Blue Lock's offense skyrocket, because anyone can be an option. If you compare that to Reo, for example, Reo might have better 1v1 skills, but when it comes to using those options, he's going to be biased toward Nagi, so it would kind of limit the potential for the offense for the Blue Lock team. Because like he says when he finally unlocks his true ego, he doesn't necessarily care who he's passing to, he's just going to pass to where he thinks the best scoring option is. So then it doesn't actually matter who's actually there to score it, as long as they score it and they're in that position, that's all Hiori actually cares about. Obviously, it doesn't apply too much right now because he's not in his true ego, but you can kind of apply it now because he does follow that rule. Because when Darai actually goes over to press Hiori, Hiori is logical, and instead of trying to get past him by himself, he makes a narrow pass in between Sendao and Einstein, and Karasu traps it. And it makes sense, because Hiori's dribbling stat isn't actually that insane, so he's not going to be able to actually dribble past this guy. So instead, he decides to make this narrow and tight pass because he knows he can make it. His passing stat is good enough. And kind of another piece of evidence which should have told us that Hiori was a talented learner even way back here is the fact that he's able to link up with Karasu this fucking easily. Because their link up isn't necessarily one leading or telling the other one what to do, it's just both of them mutually helping the other one. And because we know Karasu has an analytical mind, we should have then been able to understand that Hiori probably has the exact same one. Also, taking into account the fact that they used to play together anyway, the signs of these two being talented learners were in our face the whole time. Because like I said, we could kind of deduce who's a talented learner from their interactions with Hiori, and because Karasu is able to read what Hiori wants to do so easily without them ever talking to each other, I would then say that obviously Karasu is a talented learner. But obviously, that's not a theory anymore because Karasu has Metavision, and the only way you can get Metavision is if you're a talented learner. But I'm kind of just pointing this out because Hiori is the baseline for what a talented learner is actually going to be like, and his interactions with other people might determine whether they are or not. Kind of like how Sendout is the metaphor of a striker reaching their cap and or having a weak ego. Hiori is the metaphor of a person that could be a talented learner. But anyway, just as Hiori's finally got a moment to actually make the final pass, all of the strikers know that this nigga is so fucking good at this shit that they need to make their play now. And then when he does make the final pass, we get a comment off Sendao saying, this has Atoshi Sai levels of speed and curvature. And just to kind of break this statement down, I think that this means Hiori is approaching the level of Atoshi Sai's passes. I don't think he's actually there yet. The reason why I make that argument will kind of come back to that because I need to explain that in the PXG game. I kind of can't explain it now. But to give you a quick summary of why I'm saying that Hiori isn't actually on Sai's level is because Hiori couldn't make the final pass for the final goal in the PXG game. It had to be Ness. So then I would say because of that, because they could only score off a Ness assist and all of the passes that Hiori made got blocked and or they couldn't score off. So I would then say that Ness obviously has the higher passing stat. So if Hiori was on Sai's level now, and then he improves in the NEL, that would then mean that he's above Sai. But then if he was above Sai, couldn't he have made that pass in the PXG game? Because if Hiori was on Sai's level, he would have been able to assist the final goal in that game. They wouldn't have needed Ness. But because Hiori's not actually on that level, he's approaching it. That's why they then need Ness to make the final pass. By no means am I saying that Hiori is a bad passer. I actually still think he's the best passer in Blue Lock at the moment. I just think that this means that Hiori is approaching that level. But unfortunately, none of Hiori's passes in this game were able to be converted into a goal. At least I'm pretty sure they're not. So because Shido scores again, Hiori then moves back because he's still a really good playmaker. They just need better offensive options. I'm not saying that Hiori is bad on offense or anything. I'm just saying that they need more attacking options. Hiori isn't an option. He's a playmaker. I know that this is kind of intentional and by design, but even when Barrow gets subbed on, they don't try and use him whatsoever. They still decide that it's better to just pass the ball back to Hiori. Maybe I'm just overreading it here, but Rin passes to Hiori because Hiori is the best playmaking option on the field at the moment. He's better than Bachara, he's better than Yukimiya, he's better than everybody else. When it comes to playmaking, that's why even after getting Barrow on the field, they decide to just pass the ball all the way back to Hiori. And then as soon as Hiori gets the ball and winds up to make the final pass, we see Isagi and Rin both sprinting because they know what's about to happen. They're obviously running up because it's Hiyori's job to make the final pass, and if he fucks it up, it's not their fault. But to me at least, it seems like they have so much belief in Hiori and his passing abilities that instead of building the play up and kind of guaranteeing that it's going to be able to make it up the field, they believe that this final pass is going to make it to whatever spot they need it to. And kind of to elaborate on that point a little bit more, Hiyori's on the right-hand side where Barrow is. So Hiori can't build up plays with Barrow because Barrow's a selfish character. Let's say, for example, they swap positions. It would have technically been better for Hiori to be on that left-hand side because then he has the option to pass to Yukimiya. Because we know from the NEL that Hiori and Yukimiya can link up. So then giving Hiori somebody who has really good 1v1 potential and will pass back to him when they've made space, it would have made more sense. But because Hiori is so good at passing and reading the field, he doesn't necessarily need that other person to support him. So he's just left on the right-hand side to fend for himself, essentially. Again, maybe I'm reading into it way too much, but they at least believe that Hiori is good at what he does. But now we have finally caught up to the NEL. And one thing that I do want to mention with people talking about Hiyori's performance in the NEL is that not much would have changed if he did play in earlier games. So before I actually go into what he does in the Ubers game, let me just have this quick tangent talking about what would have changed if he did play earlier. We can eliminate the idea that he would play in the Barca game because a lot of the Blue Lock players didn't play in the Barca game, and Isagi was only able to play in it because of a contract that was set up before the NEL even started. So that only really leaves him being able to play in the Manshine game. And if he does play in the Manshine game, a couple of things might go differently, and his bid obviously would increase because he's got playtime. I don't think his bid would have increased that much because realistically speaking, in that Manshine game, because the level of that game was lower than the Ubers game, Hiori would then have the freedom to be able to actually try and score, and he might actually score in that game. But that's a hypothetical, because I would still make the argument that if Hiori did play in the Manshine game, not much about that game would have changed. Because, yes, he might have had a goal attempt, but he would have still got blocked because the mentality he was trying to score that goal with still would have been wrong. Because we saw that with Yukimiya. It doesn't matter how good you actually are as a player. If your mentality is wrong, they are going to block you in some way, shape, or form. Because then that would also explain why Chris was the one to block Yukimiya's shot, because it was supposed to be a metaphor. Because Chris Prince is a world-class player and he blocks Yukimiya, that means that Yukimiya's play isn't world-class. I know that you could make the argument that none of the plays that anybody's making at this point in time is world-class, but they technically are. They have the potential to be world-class. It's just that the players themselves have to keep evolving. But with Yukimiya and that goal formula, he's never really tried to evolve that goal formula. His goal formula is always he gets the ball, he dribbles past as many people as he can, and then he shoots. And it's never worked before, so why would it work in the NEL? Because, quick tangent, Yukimiya has been blocked every single time he just takes the ball and goes on his own dribbling spree. It happened in the third selection, it happened in the U20 game, it happened in the Manshine game, it happened in the PXG game. The PXG game is kind of different, but it's also kind of not because he still doesn't evolve that formula, and that's why he can't score. Yes, he uses Predator Eye, but that first half of his goal formula is still just him dribbling past everyone. So then, taking all of that information and applying it to Hiori, if Hiori played in the Manshine game, he would have had one goal attempt, which would have been blocked because he doesn't have the right mentality. So in some way, shape, or form, some bullshit would have stopped that goal from happening. So he wouldn't really have got a bid increase for that. But let's just say, hypothetically, he gives up after that first goal attempt and then links up with Isagi. But Isagi in this Manshine game isn't the same Isagi we know from the Ubers and the PXG game. He was less evolved at that point. So it doesn't really matter how good Hiori is at playmaking, because Isagi isn't at that level yet. Isagi's still going to have a goal attempt which gets stolen and or fails. Kaiser blocked that goal attempt from Isagi because it was built on the formula that Isagi and Corona trade up passes, building up that play, and then Isagi finally shoots. But because Corona isn't a genius level midfielder, that's kind of one of the reasons why the goal fails. But another one of the reasons why the goal fails is because Isagi is still just seeing the exact same world that Kaiser's seeing. He's not trying to one-up him. Because if you remember correctly, Isagi learned Metavision in that Manshine game, and he can't use it 100% or as effectively as he does in the Ubers and PXG game. So even if we do give him a puzzle piece like Hiori, it's not going to change that much because he's still limited in what he can actually do. So even if Hiori did play in that Manshine game, he would have had one assist that failed and one goal attempt that failed. So his bid wouldn't have changed that much. His bid would have increased about 5 to 10 mil. It wouldn't have gone up that much because he wasn't actually able to achieve anything that game. So when all the people run around saying, oh my god, Hiori got robbed, he should have played in the other games. One of the games he couldn't have even fucking played in. And the second game, he wouldn't have actually done that much in. So I actually think the bid he got was perfectly fine. But anyway, that's enough yapping about hypotheticals. Let's talk about what actually happens in the NEL. So throughout all the other games, Hiori has been watching Isagi and he's kind of been jealous because he's been seeing how much fun Isagi has been having. Because we get this comment from him after Kaiser scores his bicycle kick in the Ubers game. The intensity level is unbelievable. Damn it, I want to play. And then I'm pretty sure it's in the Manshine game, he sees Isagi unlocking Metavision and he's like, he looks like he's having so much fun. Take me with you. Maybe I'm reading into it too much, but Hiori is jealous of Isagi because Isagi is in the freedom that Hiori wanted to be in. Because that one comment of him saying he looks like he's having so much fun, take me with you. So then that kind of relates to his backstory because when he was playing football and his parents were watching him, he wasn't necessarily having fun. He wasn't in that freedom environment. But now he's seeing Isagi in that freedom environment. He's jealous. He wants to have that much fun. He wants to play with Isagi. But anyway, the Masters then get subbed on. Barrow scores his triple nutmeg super goal. That is technically a triple nutmeg if you count Snuffy's too. And then the Masters get subbed because they only have 3 minutes to play in this game and that 3 minutes has expired. So then Sendao gets subbed in for Ubers replacing Snuffy. And then Noah asks if Corona can still run. And Corona obviously can't run. So he decides to put the next best player in, which is Kiora. Just to go on a quick tangent though, I'm not going to explain it too much in this video because we're already like 35 minutes in and I'm not trying to add any more unnecessary tangents. But from this one moment in the manga, we can definitely say that Noah is a genius that uses logic. And you've got to stay with me with this. The illogicalness about Noah's genius character is that he applies logic too much. Because in this situation, logically speaking, looking at the stats and the numbers, Kiora is better than Hiori. That's not taking into account chemical reactions, play styles, who they mesh with, who they don't mesh with. Because on paper, Kiora is technically the better option. But taking into account chemical reactions and play styles, Hiori is better than Kiora. But Noah doesn't like to apply the logic of emotions or anything else. He just likes the numbers, so that's why he was going to sub Kiora in, regardless of what everybody else said. It's only after Isagi and Hiori bring him better logic as to why Hiori should play that he then decides Hiori can play. Because Noah says, alright, Corona can't run, Kiora, take your jacket off, you're going on. And then Isagi says, no, for me to become the game's hero, I ask you please put Hiori Yo in the game. And Isagi continues, sorry Kiora, but I want to try something with Hiori. I'm just one piece away, master. Please, put my partner in so I can score the winning goal. And this is where the logical genius factor comes in for Noah. He says, no, I won't accept such a childish and emotionally driven argument, Isagi Yoichi. I told you before, I only accept rational and logical driven arguments, so rejected. And this is where this hypocritical fuck comes in, right? Because he's saying that he only accepts rational and logical arguments. Isagi just gave him a rational and logical argument. Because I know that we need Hiori to expand on it a little bit more, but he literally just said, I want to try something with Hiori. He's the only person that can see the game how I see it. For me to score the final goal, I need this one last piece. And this nigga said that wasn't rational? Are you out of your fucking mind? But anyway, we're not here for me to argue with this German fuck. We're here for Hiori. And then Hiori butts in. If we had one more player who sees the game from a bird's eye view, then that player can anticipate Isagi-kun's movements and support him. If we do that, we can minimize the time Isagi-kun spends strategizing and increase his play speed. And the fact that it took Hiori to point that out to this nigga makes me think that this nigga isn't actually that logical. Because you've got experience as a pro player. You should know if you have somebody who sees the same field that you see, it's easier for you to score. But then this arrogant fuck decides, you know what, that's not actually that logical. I need more of an explanation. And it took a fucking 17-year-old to explain that to him. This nigga is just not that logical. And this is kind of one of the reasons why I think he is autistic. Because there is just no way you apply logic like that. Like, that's how autistic people do it. But anyway, Noah finally sees the light of logic and then decides, you know what, you guys are actually right and I'm a fucking idiot. Let me sub in Hiori. And now we've finally made it to Hiori actually playing in the NEL. So Hiori's finally been subbed on and now it's the final kickoff in the Ubers game. One thing I do want to point out though is that Hiori asks Isagi what the plan is and then Isagi's like, I don't have one. I'm pointing this out because everybody loves to shit on Shido saying that he never makes a plan and he just runs to a spot and expects a pass. That's exactly what Isagi's doing right now, no? Hiori's asking him what the plan is and he's like, I don't have one, we're just going to play and see what happens. We can't say that it's fine for one person to do it and then when somebody else does the exact same fucking thing, all of a sudden it's a problem. Because I told y'all from the jump, Shido is just the genius version of Isagi. They are the exact same, they work the exact same, it's just different how they apply logic. And what I mean by that basically is that Shido and Isagi will come to the same conclusion, but how they got to that conclusion is different. I don't know the exact state of the field right now, but Aiku blocks Isagi's goal attempt. And then Hiori's able to read the field and pick up the loose ball. However, he does unfortunately lose the ball because if you notice there is lightning, which means Barrow's on his way. Because we also see that Nico sees the exact same thing that Hiori does, but the only reason why Nico's late to this is because his physical stats aren't as high as Hiori's. So that's why I think that Barrow has to come in and physically press Hiori for Nico to come in and steal the ball. Because realistically speaking, Nico is seeing the exact same things that Hiori's seeing, it's just that Hiori's getting there quicker. Might be overanalyzing it, but that's kind of the point of this channel. But this might be a metaphor for Nico being on Hiori's level when it comes to vision, but not when it comes to physical abilities. That's why Barrow's here to physically press Hiori, kind of lowering the physical capabilities of Hiori to get him to Nico's level. Does that make any sense? I'm just going to act like that makes sense. But because Hiori has now lost the ball, he says, this is not good. He's on another level. And this is what I mean by Hiori playing in other games wouldn't have changed that much. I obviously believe that Ubers is a better team than Manshine because Manshine is like objectively the worst in the NEL, but I feel like Hiori would have experienced this regardless of what match he actually played in. Because let's say, for example, Ubers is here and the Manshine game's here. Even though we are going down in skill level, we're also going down in time, which also means we're going down with Hiori's skills. So I think regardless of what game he actually played in, he would have experienced this at one point or another. Because he continues with his dialogue. Ubers is insane, quick and skillful. I can't read their minds. In fact, I can't get myself into the match. This is the feeling of world class. Isagi was going for goal in this hell. Kaiser and Barrow, this level, there are only crazy guys here. They were scoring at this level. What the hell is this place? It's so fun. It's the first time in my life doing this kind of soccer. And then we see that he's got the temporary blacked out ego eyes. I'm pretty sure that this is the first time that Hiori's gotten some sort of like eye development, because even in the previous games like the U20 or the third selection, we don't actually see him in flow. And that makes sense because the mentality he was in literally just before this as well was him still just trying to avoid going home. Now that he's having fun, he's actually kind of more invested into it. Because he even starts to have a flashback to what Karasu says to him. Karasu says, all that crap about people's expectations, think about it later. Start with yourself. Believe in yourself. Find something that truly gets your blood pumping. If you don't start there, you'll just keep running in circles, idiot. But again, just to back up that Karasu is going to be a talented learner, even in this flashback, he's being very analytical and he's very accurate with what he says. Because the information that Karasu passes over to Hiori, when Hiori starts to actually apply it to his gameplay, he also starts to improve. And if you'll remember, way back earlier in the video, I said that Hiori was the better version of Isagi to feed him information. So in this point, Karasu is the better talented learner feeding information to Hiori. So it's kind of just the cycle of talented learners spreading information repeating itself. Somebody who's better at analyzing at the time then feeds information to a weaker talented learner, and then that talented learner applies it and then improves. Because this is where we also find out that the reason why Hiori's in the Blue Lock program isn't necessarily because he loves football, it's because he's avoiding his parents. Then that would also explain why he doesn't do any sort of things with his eyes up until he says, oh my god, this is so much fun, because he's not playing with the right ego. Up until that point that he did enter the temporary flow, he wasn't actually playing football because he loved it, he was just using it as an excuse to run away from his problems. By no means am I saying that his problems aren't that bad. If I had the pressure of being a good player and that was going to make or break if my parents were going to stay together, I also probably wouldn't like playing that sport either. Because even ignoring the emotional side of why you wouldn't want to play football, the environment that his parents are putting him into isn't the environment he needs for his ego type to flourish. Because we see in the PXG game that he gets categorized as a freedom holistic type, and his parents have been putting him through a restricted environment. Because he's got all of this pressure of actually being the world's best striker, and if he doesn't do it, they're going to divorce. So then, it goes without saying, that is a restricted environment. Because then that would also explain why it's only after he says that he's having fun that he then starts to develop his temporary ego. Because like I said, up until that point where he says, I'm having so much fun, we don't see any sort of eye thing from him. I'm pretty sure. We don't see flow, we don't see metavision, we don't see none of that. Because he even points out that he was in a restricted environment. Because for me, things like expectations are just curses. They chain and weigh me down. Restricted environment. Because we actually find out the true ego he's been playing with up until the NEL. And it's built on him just not wanting to go home. Because he says, I don't want to go home. I don't want to go home. Clinging desperately to that ego. I managed to hang on and survive. But skipping forward in time just like a tad, Ubers is now on the counter and Sendao then passes the ball over to Barrow, who passes it back. While that's happening, Hiori then thinks to himself, the quality of their combination plays, I've never experienced this before. And the fact that Barrow-kun can get the best out of them, a king-like move. But it's not like he's moving selfishly. Barrow-kun. And then, I don't think I saved the next panels for this, but then he basically just goes into the fact that some people have egos that draw people towards them, like Barrow and Isagi, for example. Wait, I'm a dumbass. I actually did save it. Never mind. Even though he's a selfish jerk, the aura he admits makes people trust and follow him. Players who become the world's #1 striker, they probably have that ability that makes people follow them. Amazing. I can't do that. An ego that teammates believe, trust, and gravitate towards. So with this one little quote saying, I can't do that, to me at least, that tells me that his next goal attempt was definitely going to fail because he doesn't have the right mentality or ability to be a striker. Because to be a good striker, you need an ego that teammates believe, trust, and gravitate towards. And that's why people like Hiori and Yukimiya, they can have goal attempts and or goals, but they'll never be seen as a true striker because they're not drawing people towards them. Am I saying they're bad as players? Absolutely not. I'm not trying to be blasphemous with this. With the requirements of a striker constantly rising each time, that's why an ego check is now a part of it. Because it doesn't matter how good you are as an individual, if you don't have an ego that draws people towards you and they feel like they can trust you, you're not going to be seen as a good striker. Because really quickly, Nagy has an ego that people don't believe in because Chris and Aggie was like, you need to change if you're going to improve. They don't trust him because when Chris gets the ball in the final Barca game, he doesn't try to set Nagy up, he just instantly gives up on him and goes to Rayo. And the people that do gravitate towards Nagy are kind of biased because they believe in his potential rather than his skill at the moment. Because so far, the only two people that actually cared that Nagy left was Isagi and Rayo, and they're both talented learners. And it's funny because with those two being talented learners, confirmed talented learners pretty much, it makes sense that they're able to actually understand the potential that Nagy has. It's just unfortunate that Rayo's not able to actually communicate that to the world. And to be honest, Isagi might have had an easier time communicating it to the world. Anyway, I did say no more tangents, and that was like a fucking 3-minute long one. My bad. But anyway, tangent aside, Hiori quotes, I'm pretty sure that might have been himself saying, I'm going to be the world's best player. I never really cared about being number one, but then I saw him, a player who sees the game as I do, a player with his eyes set on being the world's best player. I have the key to Isagi Yoichi's evolution. No, I'm the only one who can unlock his full potential. Then bringing that all the way back to the third selection, Hiori did give Isagi another key to his evolution by giving him information about how Karasu works and what the reflex kind of movement is. But anyway, Hiori continues, those golden opportunities that only I can see, they are the reason to fight. Isagi has the potential to become the world's best striker, but we fail to capitalize on the golden opportunities. There are good chances the world will forget about his potential. I'll unlock it. You dumb fuck, you've been giving him this key to his potential this entire time. You did it in the third selection. But anyway, he continues, a future where Isagi dominates the world stage. That's a future worth living for. I'll make Isagi the king. And it's funny that we're talking about the king when we're playing against Ubers, which is spearheaded by Barrow, the king. Although I don't think Ubers was actually the best option for Barrow if he wanted to improve, his dynamic with the Ubers team is the exact dynamic that all the strikers need to have with their teammates. Well, maybe not the exact one, but it's pretty close to what you need to have. So Hiori has just activated Metavision. Nico receives the ball. He then makes a trap and says here. And then Lorenzo comes out of fucking nowhere, says boo, and steals the ball. Kaiser and Isagi was able to see through this plan, but just as they're about to tackle Lorenzo, he makes a pass over to Barrow. Look at this nigga, bro. He's got his tongue out. He's full fucking cheesing. Also, quick tangent. I know I said I was going to drop it, but let's be honest, we were never going to drop the tangents. But are you seriously going to tell me that Isagi and Kaiser both decided to go to Lorenzo instead of marking Barrow when Isagi at the start of the game knew that this was one of Barrow's formulas? Like, to me, the fact that they're both here, you niggas are idiots. And then for Isagi to be all shocked and be like, shit, in front of the penalty area, Barrow, nigga, you just blocked this! But thank fucking God Hiori actually has a memory and remembers this goal formula and then shuts it down. And as he does that, we see this key go into this chain that's been around his neck and it burst open. And then this is basically a metaphor for the pressure of being the world's best striker on Hiori being lifted. He then starts to dribble the ball up, cooking the fuck out of Sandow. I am going to give him credit where it's due. He is good at dribbling, I'm not going to deny that, but the dribbling stat and feet are inconsistent because he only does it in this game. We've never seen him dribble in any other game. It's just this one. I will say, though, in other games, he does show off that he does have really good ball-keeping abilities, and I think that's what's being expressed here. Because he's not playing with his true ego back then, he's just keeping the ball. That's why he doesn't dribble. And then now he's playing with an actual ego and starts to dribble. And then when he figures out that this formula doesn't work out, that's when he drops the dribbling and just starts to trade passes. Because just like with Yukimiya, it doesn't matter how good your dribbling feats actually are, unless you're able to turn them into a goal, they're not a viable option. Another quick tangent, if we're talking the top 3 dribblers in Blue Lock, I would probably say Bachara, Rin, and then Yukimiya. Bachara is obviously the best at dribbling because it's his main weapon, and he's obviously going to be the best at that. Rin is obviously really good at dribbling because he went on that rampage in the U20 game and then he went on that rampage in the PXG game. So we can't say that he's not good at dribbling because he's done it in at least 2 matches. So even though he doesn't dribble too much, because he's done it in 2 separate matches, it does mean that it is something he is capable of doing. And then I've got Yukimiya third because yes, he might not be able to turn his dribbling into a goal, so it's not an actual viable weapon, but he's still the 3rd best in the program when it comes to dribbling. Anyway, Hiori's got the ball, he's making his way up the field, and then he passes to Isugi like this. And then as the pass is going over to Isugi, we see him glancing around, scanning the field. And he says, even sharper, there's no margin for error. Isugi and Hiori are making their way up the field, trading 1-2 passes, and they even get Yukimiya involved. This panel then also backs up that the NEL was based around originality and reaching your 0 point because Hiori says, the emergence of the next football hero, a hero that will change the history of football, a vision that only I can envision, my originality. And then when he gets the ball, he cooks the fuck out of these 3 players. And like I said before, I'll give him his flowers. He cooks the fuck out of these 3 guys, but at the same time, his dribbling isn't consistent. So we can't apply these feats in this game and say that that's Hiori's baseline when he doesn't do it in games outside of this one. We then see Hiori tap into his temporary ego once again and say it's time to synchronize my vision with his goal. And as the pass is going over to Isugi, we low-key have this terrifying smile on Isugi's face and he says, awesome Hiori, perfect. But unfortunately, he's being double pressed by both Lorenzo and Aiku. And because of his training with his left leg, he's able to pump fake both of them. I'm actually stupid. This is his right foot, not his left foot. But I am still kind of right because they were aiming for the lefty direct shot. So I'm just going to keep that in. Anyway, Hiori then says, that's right. The first move was a fake. Our true aim was for the lefty direct shot. A 2-stage attack allowing Isugi to create enough space to shoot freely. And then if you notice, we see Kaiser in this corner saying, I'd figured you'd do that. And then they both shoot the ball at the exact same time. And maybe I'm just overanalyzing it like usual, but maybe this is a metaphor for Isugi now being on that world-class level. Like, obviously, he's not at Kaiser's level, but he's at the world-class level. Some shenanigans happen, and then the shot obviously gets blocked, and then Hiori picks up the loose ball, and Isugi says, one more. And Hiori says, Isugi's asking for the ball. He still believes in me. Dude, why the fuck would he not believe in you? He literally said the pass you made was perfect. Whatever though. But then Hiori monologues to himself and says, we'll reset our attack, surpass our previous winning vision, create a new attack pattern, surpass the expectations Isagi has for me. But now because he's focusing on expectations, this is where the 0 point starts to settle in. And just as he's about to reset his attack, we see these 2 phantoms of his parents. His dad says, that's it, shoot it, yo. And his mum says, we expect great things from you. Become number 1, you hear me? We believe in you. And this all kind of kicked off because he started thinking about why the expectations that Isugi has for him are different to the ones that his parents have for him. Because Hiori starts a monologue. From the start, my parents heaped expectations on me. I hated that, and I can't read that because the record thing's in the way, so I'm not going to. And this is where the questioning starts to happen. But right now, isn't all I'm doing is trying to live up to Isagi-kun's expectations? And then Isugi screaming out, pass it! Hiori! But Hiori continues monologuing. But I don't hate Isagi's expectations for me, so what's the right answer? And then a phantom of ego pops up and it tells him to shoot. Isn't that what a striker's all about? And then Hiori thinks, that's right, this is blue lock. Maybe the missing piece was my shooting ability. But Isugi's still screaming out, Hiori, look at me, give it! But then Hiori thinks to himself, no, it's because of Isugi that I managed to get this far. And then Ego says, shoot. And keep in mind, nigga's in full fucking flow when he says this. So I actually believe that this is the real Ego because for one, it looks different. And for two, it's able to go into Ego. So it's probably Ego watching this match, getting fully invested, being like, shoot, go and do it. This is what you're here for, right? And then Hiori goes, what is the right choice? But then he starts to remember what Karasu told him. Believe in yourself. Find something that truly gets your blood pumping. If you don't start there, you'll keep running in circles, idiot. And then Hiori thinks, I get it now. Until now, which also explains the whole fucking I thing I was talking about, I never took my future into my own hands. I let my parents decide my future, and I blamed them and ran away when things didn't go right for me. No one will love or give a crap about me. The missing piece? I was afraid of being alone and abandoned. I'm genuinely pathetic. I pretend I'm a stoic person. I'm just a coward who keeps running away. From now on, I won't hide behind people's expectations of me. I'm only gonna believe in myself. If I end up being alone and abandoned after this, that's fine by me. If I was truly born for the sole purpose of playing football, this shot will be my answer. And then he fucking shoots. And this is also when he does enter full flow. But because his goal formula wasn't recreatable and the foundations of his striker ego are so weak, that's why Sendao comes in the way and blocks the shot. And then after Sendao blocks it, he says, I guess I wasn't a person who was born to play football. I suffered so much, experienced so much frustration. I tried so hard to believe that playing football was my purpose. But that shot told me I wasn't worthy. But I'm okay with that. After I go home, I'll tell my folks. And then we see Isagi in full fucking flow sprinting over to him. And surprise, surprise, this is another tangent. He obviously doesn't technically know about this yet, but he is using protagonism. Because he's using protagonism and analyzing Hiori, that's why he's in full flow now, because he's basically racking his brain to find a formula that can fit Hiori in and he can score from. And with Hiori showing a new weapon with his shot style, that then gives him that extra puzzle piece he was looking for, because now he can pump fake Hiori shooting. So to me at least, it's funny that Isagi's in full flow now, because he's definitely trying his best to get the best out of Hiori. Because he understands that Hiori is incredibly talented, it's just that something's not right at the moment. Obviously, we know that it's his mentality and the environment that he's been in up until this point, but Isagi hasn't learned any of that yet. Anyway, he sprints over to Hiori and says, Hiori, one more! And it's this freedom of Isagi still having this expectation for Hiori, but not piling any pressure on him, that then puts Hiori into an actual freedom environment. Because Isagi doesn't necessarily care how Hiori does what he does, he just wants Hiori to make that final pass so he can score. Because even though Hiori technically betrayed Isagi and shot when he was supposed to pass, because the shot was on target, that means that Isagi has a new weapon to threaten Ubers with. So that's why he didn't really care that Hiori tried to shoot, because it was on target. I imagine if the ball wasn't on target, he would have been pissed. Quick theory here, but I imagine if your shot's on target and it gets blocked, that means that you're trying to improve, it's just what you're doing now isn't goal worthy. But if your shot completely misses, it means that something is wrong with your mentality of how you're going about improving. Because that would also explain why Kaiser's first Magnus shot goes so fucking far off target, because his mentality's not in the right space to improve. Because we know when he breaks himself down for that second shot, his first mentality was just completely wrong. That first shot came from the mentality of him being stagnant and just staying still on climbing to the top. So Isagi has told Hiori to try one more time. Aiku has got the ball and he's dribbling up and he's dribbling past Kaiser? Wait, that is Aiku! Bro, what are you doing? I know it's not actually real, but I am now going to die on the hill that Aiku did in fact dribble past Kaiser. But anyway, Hiori's continuing to monologue to himself saying, Isagi still believes in me. Why? Instead of passing, I decided to shoot. I betrayed him. And I'm surprised that you're surprised that Isagi still wants to use you, because in the Manshine game, you saw that Yukimiya stole the ball off him, dribbled up the field, shot, missed, and Isagi was still like, let's work together. So you shouldn't really be that surprised. But then Isagi returns the advice that Hiori gave to him way back in the third selection. Isagi says, don't look, don't even think. Go crazy, Hiori. Surpass our wildest imaginations instinctively. God damn. Reflexively. But Hiori thinks to himself, reflex? That's the same advice I once gave to Isagi. But why now? I don't get it. I don't get it, but why every single time? Every single time. I want to meet Isagi's expectations of me. And then he thinks back to the expectations his parents put on him. If Yo can't be the best in the world, then I want a divorce. My parents were always focused on my physical specs, my human side. But Isagi's different. Isagi's expectations aren't focused on the human side, the things that can change through actions. His expectations are super goal-oriented, especially goals that have the power to change his destiny. Ever since he's arrived at Blue Lock, Isagi has been searching for comrades who can help him achieve that reality. That's why everyone gets drawn to Isagi Oichi's ego, and to not get devoured by him, they evolve at an explosive rate. Kunigami shows off some of his defensive value and blocks Barrow's shot. Nagamaru is able to grab the loose ball before anybody on Ubers can, and then he makes a pass which Hiori intercepts. And as he traps the ball, he says, a shitty pass like that will never result in a goal unless I'm there to get it. First of all, who the fuck do you think you are talking shit about Gagamaru? Because let's be honest, the pass that he was making to Isagi was low-key pretty good. Obviously, he's throwing that ball. Don't you fucking dare talk shit about him again. He was very close. Hiori thinks to himself, this will be my last attack. Just one last time, I'll share that crazy twisted ego of yours. He then does this insane rainbow flick pass that goes to Isagi. And I actually think that this skill right here was more dependent on his passing abilities and his ball control abilities. Because although he does do a rainbow flick over Lorenzo and then runs behind his blind spot, the ball was always going to Isagi. It was a pass more than a dribbling technique. So if anybody says that Hiori rainbow flicked Lorenzo and that was like a dribbling feat, it was not a dribbling feat, it was a passing feat. Hiori and Isagi then trade 1-2 passes as they make their way up the field. And even Lorenzo comments on how sexy that pass was. And Nico's like, a rainbow flick 1-2? And you actually see here, he's got Metavision active. And I might be overglazing here, but we never really see Nico's eyes. So the fact that they put the little detail of him having Metavision in this little panel of showing his eyes, I fuck with it. I love all the little details like that. Hiori then gets the ball and he does this weird like 180 twist move and gets past Person and Lorenzo. And to me at least, this seems more like a ball keeping technique than it does like an actual dribbling feat. Does that make any sense? To be honest, I'm probably going to shut up about this whole ball keeping versus dribbling thing because they're essentially the same thing. Like, they're not the same thing, but I can't explain how they're different. So for the sake of just making this easier, I'm just going to shut the fuck up about the whole ball control arguments. Because I don't really care, and the fact that Hiori doesn't dribble outside of the Ubers game shows that it is more ball control versus dribbling, so there you go. Hiori then makes a nutmeg pass through Aldi's legs to pass the ball to Isagi. Golden star if you understand the reference. But as he traps the ball, he thinks to himself, is it because of Isagi's nosiness? Kindness? Friendship? Definitely not. I don't give a crap about any of that. If I'm being frank, the only thing I care about is seeing whether Isagi is the real deal. And again, this quote right here, you could apply to him earlier on because he's subconsciously doing it. He doesn't obviously do it consciously, but I think it's funny that in the third selection, he uses Isagi and Rin, and both of them score off his assist, and then both of them in the arc after the next arc end up being the best in the program. So he was kind of always testing to see if the people were the real deal or not. Because even when Hiori makes that pass to Isagi in the third selection and Isagi is this close and he misses it, so even though Hiori goes over and says, I'm sorry the pass wasn't that good, he's just saying that because he feels obligated to say it because of his background of his parents saying, oh, it's always your fault. This is a headcanon, so take everything I'm going to say for the next like 2 seconds with a grain of salt, but maybe Hiori intentionally passed it a little bit away from Isagi because he's a sadist. Because there wasn't any real reason why he couldn't have made the pass a little bit shorter. Like, I'm pretty sure it wouldn't have got blocked if he made it an inch shorter. But he didn't, because if he did, Isagi could have scored it and Isagi wouldn't have evolved. So maybe, this sadistic fuck in the third selection intentionally passed it a little bit out of Isagi's reach because he wanted Isagi to actually start to evolve. Again, headcanon. I'm fully aware it's a headcanon. I don't even wholeheartedly believe in it. I just think it's pretty funny to throw out there. Anyway, Hiori continues. Then I want to experience change around me. That moment, the world. And then he also cuts off his thinking to say, what the hell? I can't believe I had this much of a greedy ego. But Hiori continues. This is the first time my mind and body are perfectly in sync when playing football. Then we see Hiori, Yukimiya, and Isagi trading passes, building their play up. Hiori's continuing to monologue to himself thinking, no, I can't deliver it if he can't get behind the defense. I'm still not in range to deliver the final pass. We still haven't broke down their defense, but this might be the perfect timing. No, we're still too far. He still hasn't shaken off his marks. In that case, what's the best option? So then, this is the exact scenario that I'm talking about when everybody says that Shido doesn't tell his midfielders what he's doing. Isagi isn't telling Hiori what to do right now. Because Hiori goes, huh? Why the hell did you stop? Keep moving, goddammit. How am I supposed to pass you if you stopped, idiot? You want me to go rogue and selfish and go for goal, asshole? What the hell is he thinking? What are you... Hold on. Don't look. Don't even think. Surpass our wildest imaginations instinctively. And he goes, reflexively. And he starts to break himself down too. Also like how auras do affect how people break themselves down, because Hiori's is ice and we see these cracks forming. Isagi's is puzzles and he breaks down into puzzle pieces. And with like Kaiser, for example, we see all these little petals coming off his skin. So I just want to say that I love that little detail. The auras actually affect how the people break themselves down. But then Isagi says to Hiori, "That's right, Hiori, realize it." And then Hiori thinks, "So that's your plan? That maniac." Hiori continues, "Wait, can he even pull it off? No matter how you look at it, this is crazy." And Isagi goes, "Right now, the field blind spot, sense it." But Hiori continues, "Theoretically, it's possible." And Isagi still stood there, not telling him what the plan is, just egging him on to pass. Saying, "Come on, Hiori, I know you can do it." And then Hiori replies in his head, "All right, you arrogant bastard, let's do this, egoist." And we then get this amazing double spread of Hiori breaking himself down to ice and Isagi breaking himself down to puzzle pieces. And if you'll notice up here, they're kind of meshing together. Like, you can see little details here, like the puzzle pieces are flying over to Hiori and Hiyori's shards of ice are flying over to Isagi. And then Hiori says, "I, Hiori will become the center of the world." And that's when he fully enters his flow state. Because now he's using his true ego, which isn't him trying to be the best player in the world, it's him making the play that makes the best player in the world. Because kind of like Kiora having the ego of being like, I go for the weakest because if they win, it's because of me. Kind of translating that over to Hiori. Hiori is kind of the same, but he's like, if you're the world's best, it's because of me. So it's like kind of similar. It's just that Hiori doesn't have to pick between two people. He just picks out of everybody on the field. So in a way, Hiyori's actually kind of the opposite of Kiora, because Hiori goes out of his way to team up with the strongest person. And then Kiora, being the complete opposite, wants to team up with the weakest person. So that's just like a fun little parallel for you. But Hiyori's got the ball, he's dribbling up to Nico, and Nico says, "He accelerated. I can't stop him in a 1v1. In that case, my job is to slow down Hiyori's attack." Right now, Isagi is playing off Hiyori's movements to receive the final pass, but I won't let Isagi move. That's what Aryu is saying. And we go into Aiku's thoughts, aiming for the chaos created by those two, predicting the trajectory of Hiyori's pass. This guy is intent on forcibly snatching the winning goal. Don't take your eyes off Kaiser. And Kaiser then says, "Kill Yoichi." Kill John Lennon! Kill John Lennon! Hiori then moves the ball over to his left-hand side, and then as Nico is moving to that left-hand side, he flicks it way back over to the right-hand side. And with that one move, he's able to create some space and force Nico to run over to his left. And then everybody points out that Hiori isn't even looking to where he's actually going to pass to. He's looking at the ball. As Hiori is winding up to make the final pass, we see Lorenzo charging in to block the route. Thankfully, because of his metavision, he's able to chip the ball up and stop Lorenzo from stealing it. As the ball's in the air, we see a familiar looking aura come over, and it's Barrow, saying, "How fucking predictable. In the end, you're just gonna pass." There, the pass route sealed off. Without Isagi, you're just an insignificant lackey, too weak to fight for himself. But then Hiori replies, "Too slow, dumbass. I can already see Isagi scoring the winning goal." And then Barrow's like, "Huh?" And we see Isagi start to make his run. And both Kaiser and Aiku are both confused because he can't see what Hiyori's doing. Kaiser, Aiku, and Aryu then say, "This guy, he's not." And then Barrow thinks the exact same about Hiori. "This guy, he's not." They aren't even looking at each other. And then Hiori makes the final pass. And because Isagi was the first person to move reflexively, he then is able to react to this pass. Both Aiku and Aryu are stunned, and Kaiser's still confused on how he's able to do this. Then both Hiori and Isagi say, if we're the real deal, by clashing and crossing our visions of becoming the best player in the world, then Isagi fucking shoots and scores! And I'm finally done with the Ubers game. Thank fucking God, bro. We can go beyond our wildest dreams. And to bring this full circle with something I brought up kind of towards the start of the video, their Reflex X Reflex goal was hinted at in the third selection. Because in the third selection, Hiori is technically playing reflexively because he's telling Isagi if he wants to level up, that's what he needs to do. So then if they were actually able to link up officially in that game, he then would have scored the Reflex X Reflex goal. And more specifically, I mean the goal attempt where he just missed shooting it. So if Isagi was reacting reflexively, he would have got to that point a little bit quicker and been able to actually shoot and score. But not only that, because Hiori is acting and passing reflexively, and then he's acting and receiving reflexively, it would have been the first reflex X reflex goal. But obviously, Isagi wasn't at that level, so the first person to actually officially do it was Shido. But like, just to kind of break the fourth wall for a second here, I'm so fucking glad that we've made it through the Ubers. Y'all don't understand how long this video is taking to make. I've been talking about Hiori for 6 hours for 2 fucking days. Release me! So because low-key, I'm tired of talking about him and he doesn't actually do too much in the PXG game, I am just going to go through his feats and some interesting things that did happen in this game. I might skip over a couple things just because I do want to finish this today. So if I miss anything too important, please feel free to fill me in the comments. So then anything important I actually do miss, I will update in a video for TikTok because I'm not doing this video again. But anyway, that's enough yapping. Let's finally finish this video. So we get kickoff in the PXG game and it's absolute chaos. Everybody's stealing the ball from everyone. Deflections are going everywhere. And at one point, the ball falls to Hiori, and he's holding off Tokimitsu, but he gets it stolen by Nanase. This isn't exactly after the panel I just showed you, because it's going to seem like it is, but it's not. Nanase gets the ball after some more shenanigans, and then passes the ball to Rin. I'm pretty sure this is just after Rin destroys the Kaiser Impact. He then dribbles past a couple of people, passes the ball to Nanase, and Nanase passes it back. So now Rin is winding up to shoot. Both Kaiser and Isagi think they're able to read Rin's true intentions, but just as Kaiser goes to block and Isagi goes to kind of stop him, he says, "You're wrong. I can shoot. I've just been waiting for this exact moment." He then chips the ball up, grabs Isagi by the scruff of his neck and says, "Here's your VIP seat," and winds up his shot. But thankfully, Hiori is able to read the field and block this shot because he knows that Rin is going to do this with Isagi because he knows he's gunning for him. And then Hiori says to Rin, "If you want to score, you might want to come up with a better script that I can't predict, dumbass." But anyway, Karasu picks up the loose ball and says, "Hiori, you've gotten more aggressive since the last time we've met." Then Hiori charges over to try and tackle Karasu and he says, "You hate it?" And then Karasu replies, "Nah, not in the slightest. Took you long enough, you damn slowpoke." Hiori just says thank you. I fucking love their dynamic. Because I know for a fact, Karasu being a talented learner definitely understood the potentials and skill that Hiori had. He just knew that he wasn't in the right environment at the moment. And I love the fact that despite this being the most intense game in the entire NEL, these two are just having a conversation. And another kind of interesting thing that is reflected on the bids is the fact that Karasu probably does have a better analytical eye than Hiori. Because for one, he ends up with a bid higher than Hiori's. And for two, he's able to make this back heel pass to Charles, which Hiori doesn't know he's there. Because both Isagi and Hiori are like a back pass, but it's only in the next panel that we see that Charles is actually there, and then Charles winds up his shot and passes to Shido. Because in the next panel we see Karasu full fucking cheesing because he knows what's about to happen. The ball then falls to Charles, and Charles winds up his pass and passes to Shido! And it obviously goes without saying, because Shido is out-versal, at the minimum, he's able to score that. But just after Shido scores that goal, Hiori walks over to Isagi and they have like a little brainstorm about what's just happened. They then break down the formula to figure out how to reach your top performance. And obviously, like I said at the start of the video, talented learners sitting down to spread information with each other is going to make both of them better. Because one might bring up something the other one didn't see, the other one might bring up something the other one didn't see, and /or one could give the other one advice on how to improve, and vice versa. And to me at least, it's funny as fuck that these two are sitting down to take a second to analyze what's just happened. Isagi's doing it because he's a character that obviously adapts and evolves with more information. Obviously, all talented learners do, but Isagi is like the living embodiment of it. And Hiori's probably doing it because the more he understands about top performances and how to get that out of somebody else, the better he's going to be at his position. And the better he is in his position, the easier it's going to be to find and create the best player in the world. I'm going to kind of rush through this game because I am getting really burnt out talking about this now. But Hiori in this game wasn't good enough as a midfielder to actually make the final pass. And I'm not saying that because I think Hiori's a bad midfielder. I'm just pointing out the actual facts of this game. Because Hiori's final pass in this game wasn't actually good enough to be the final pass. It needed to deflect off Kunagami to go to Isagi. Because assuming that Kunagami wasn't going to be in this formula, this goal never would have happened. And I know that that's kind of obvious, but when you consider that Hiori can't even make the final pass for Isagi and or Kaiser to score the final goal, it makes sense that he can't make the final pass for Isagi to score the first goal, because the level and intensity of this game is higher than his skills as a midfielder. So that's why we need Kunigami to deflect the ball over to Isagi, because Hiori's passing stat is just not high enough at the moment. Hiori is even able to read and analyze Charles to the point where he can shut down his passing routes, or at least one of them. And it's really lucky that Hiori did come to stop this, because it did go past Kaiser and Ness. And because it got past those two, I'm assuming that it would have got past Kunigami as well, because that's why Hiori blocked it, and Shido actually would have scored off that. I know that I said that he doesn't have the skill to make the final pass, but I will give him his credit where it's due. He is able to see the same realm roughly that Kaiser and Isagi have. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to actually link up with them. And I know that that link up doesn't actually result in a goal because his passing stat isn't good enough, but he's still able to do it. So his field IQ and vision is kind of on the same level as Kaiser and Isagi. The only reason why I think that it's just like a slight bit below it is because later on in the game, it's up to Kaiser and Isagi to stop Rin. So I would then make the argument that Hiori's field IQ is just slightly below the two of them, because if it wasn't, he would also be trying to stop Rin. And the final thing I want to talk about in the PXG game is kind of just elaborating on the fact that Hiori couldn't make the final pass because he wasn't good enough at passing. We've skipped forward in time a little bit. Kaiser and Isagi have teamed up, and then Hiori links up with Isagi. But this link up or this formula wasn't good enough because Karasu comes in to block Isagi's shot. And as the ball falls to Kaiser, he says, "Oh, Lady Luck is smiling on me." And then when Kaiser shoots, he also gets blocked by Charles. Keep in mind, this formula, i.e. the final pass, was made by Hiori, and they got blocked both times. Obviously, the deflection of Karasu to Kaiser doesn't count as Hiori's pass, but it's still, the foundation's still there. And then finally, the final piece of evidence to prove that he wasn't good enough to make the final pass in this game, again, not trying to talk shit, is at this point. He faces off against Karasu, he beats Karasu, and then he links up with Kaiser. And again, I'll give my flowers where they're due. He is able to read that Rin will go for Isagi, so he passes to Kaiser. But unfortunately, that pass wasn't good enough because Shido is able to intercept it. I don't have the panel of Rin running to Isagi, but I have the panel of the pass going through and then Shido blocking it. The ball was going to go to Charles, but thankfully Kunigami heads it away, and then the ball starts to fall to Ness. And then when Ness makes the final pass, they can score off it instantly. And to me at least, that makes so much sense because Ness is better in the midfield than Hiori is. It makes sense why he got higher bid. It makes sense why he was able to make the final pass. It makes sense why they was able to score off it. Because even though Ness's mentality was wrong at the time, his skills are still better than Hiori's. So then after he goes through that mental evolution, he's able to make the final pass. But we're finally done with this video. If you made it this far, thank you for watching the entire thing. I'm genuinely burnt out now, so I'm not going to say that much. Thanks for indulging my bullshit as always. Drink water, look after yourself. Peace.